We start with the Honorable Scott Wilk, who was born and raised in the 21st Senate District, which he now represents in the California State Senate. The district includes the Antelope, Santa Clarita, and Victor Valleys. Before being elected to the Senate, Scott represented the 38th Assembly District for 4 years, where his focus was on job creation. Scott currently serves as vice chair of 4 Senate committees: the Committees on Education, Agriculture, Rules, and Governmental Organization. In addition to his vice chairmanships, he is also a member of the Committees on Business, Professions and Economic Development, and Veterans Affairs. Scott and his lovely wife, Vanessa, reside in Santa Clarita with their 2 spoiled dogs. I'm reading this from what was given. They have 2 adult children and a precious grandson. So welcome, Senator Scott. Welcome. Next, I have the pleasure of introducing Christy Smith, our Assemblywoman for the 38th District. Christy was elected to the California Assembly in November of 2018 and represents the 38th Assembly District that includes the communities of Agua Dulce, Castaic, Santa Clarita, Simi Valley, and northern San Fernando Valley. As a 37-year resident of Santa Clarita, Christy graduated Hart High, attended College of the Canyons before graduating with honors from UCLA. She formerly served 2 terms as a governing board member of the Newhall School District. In Sacramento, Christy chairs the Joint Legislative Committee on Emergency Management and serves on the committees of Accountability and Administrative Review, Education, Privacy and Consumer Protection, and Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy. Christy lives in Santa Clarita with her husband, Philip, and their 2 daughters. Welcome. And with that, I would like to bring up our moderator for today's review, and that is Mr. Ed Masterson, our immediate past chairman of the board and man of the year.
That's funny.
Just wanted to announce my presence there. Sorry about that. All right. Cody, I think we're good on the levels, yeah? I wanted to, if it's all right, give a proper and correct introduction to Mr. David Barlavi from the Saugus Union School District. David, sorry we got your name incorrect on that. There we go. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah? All right, good.
Kind of loud.
Kind of loud? Okay. So the first thing I wanted to do was welcome all of you to the lunch today. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll get that little hum worked out in a second. And I also wanted to thank Assemblywoman Smith and Senator Wilk for coming out today. I thank them for a couple things. First of all, for making time in their schedules for coming out to join us. I think for those of us who don't work, there's a lot of elected officials in this room. School board, water board, county, city council, state, federal. And I don't think those of us who don't serve in that position always realize how difficult of a task it is to commit yourself to that position and to work at that level representing all of us in this room. So the first thing I want to do is to thank both of you for doing that. You give a tremendous amount of time, and even though technically it is the job you were elected to do, there is a lot of time, just like teachers who put in a lot of time that nobody sees, that you do on behalf of the people you represent. So that's my first thank you. Thank you for doing all that, number one. The second thank you would be, thank you for doing that in a very classy and classy manner. Both of you are always, in addition to being very good at what you do and always being on top of your game in terms of legislative issues and things that people want to ask you about, you're always very sincere and congenial and very classy in the way you do it. And again, in today's world, that is something to be said. So number two, thank you. Thank you to both of you for that. What we'll do here is each of Senator Wilk and Assemblywoman Smith will each do some remarks, and then after the remarks, they'll talk about some things of interest and concern to them in Sacramento, things that they want us to know about. Then we'll take some questions that have been submitted. So I think, Assemblywoman Smith, if you're okay, we could go ahead and you could
Great.
start your presentation.
Okay.
And go ahead.
Great. Thank you. So I think that it's helpful when we're talking about policy debates and the overall well-being of the state to kind of frame that in the context of what this most recent budget looked like. I mean, after all, you should all know where your money's going. And so I have a small presentation on that. I'm not going to read everything to you, but I just want to hit some of the highlights and talk about their relevance from a policy perspective. This year, an investment in education, there was a heavy focus on preschool and child care. And all three of these bullet points speak to what has been a pressing state need to close a significant learning and skills gap. We know that in the next decade and 2 decades, we will not be training enough people at the technical skill levels that we need them across the industry sectors we want, not only to keep in California, but to continue to attract in California, whether that's the tech sector, the finance sector. We really need to be upping our game when it comes to our students' academic potential. That begins with a heavier investment in preschool and childcare. And then, of course, public schools, and I know a lot of my school board friends are here, so let us not think that this $12,000 per student is kind of an accurate reflection of what our local districts are getting, because their funding streams are not the same. They don't qualify for full supplemental grant programming. But that $12,000 per student is kind of an aggregate across the state of what's being invested at that level for this year. And that does include some pension pay down, because we had still some significant pension loss to recover from. And the governor has been committed, as was Governor Brown, to paying down those pension obligations. That's all lumped into that amount. But we still need to be on a trajectory to becoming nationally competitive with particularly our K-12 education funding if we're going to be able to close that skills gap that I talked about. And then finally, access to college, most importantly. I mean, we've had a significant shortage of available seats at both our Cal State system and our UC system. Our local community college obviously has been fortunate to expand. We now have 2 campuses and they serve every possible student that they can. But the reality is that a lot of the students that they are serving did qualify for a UC or a CSU program, and there simply wasn't a seat for them. So we're very glad that we have such a high quality community college here that can serve them, and then they can move on to those CSU and UC seats as they become available. But this year's budget invests considerably in making sure that we're expanding both of those systems. Emergency management, I'm privileged to be the chair of the Joint Legislative Committee on Emergency Management. You know, nothing like throwing a freshman in right when you've had, you know, a couple of years of the worst wildfires ever. And it was a steep learning curve, but it's work that I'm really privileged and proud to be able to do, to be working with not only CAL FIRE, but our local law enforcement and firefighting agencies to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to keep them safe on the front lines as they do their work, and that we continue to harden our communities and make them more resilient in what is the new unfortunate normal of year-round fire season. That is not changing. Climate scientists tell us that's not changing. And so it's great to be able to work hand in glove, not only with them, but folks like our communications industry, telecom, to ensure that we've got security measures in place to be able to communicate with residents in the event of an evacuation or a serious emergency. So we're dealing on that committee with both wildfire and earthquake. So we're going to be obviously revisiting our earthquake preparedness, as Ridgecrest was a kind of a frightening reminder of, you know, there's always one right around the corner. But those are some of the best investments that are happening in emergency management this cycle, just because based on the fires that happened up north, Woolsey, that we experienced down here in Southern California, there's a significant need for investment in keeping our communities safe. Transportation. This is ironically the first area that I got my hand slapped in the legislature, because I've got an entire district full of people who are paying the gas tax, just like everybody else. And we have significant local infrastructure needs that are tied to housing development, which is the state mantra. We need more housing, we need more housing. We are set and equipped to provide that housing here, but we need help with our transportation infrastructure. So went into a meeting a little heavy-handed and was told to chill a bit, but I'm not going to, because It's too important. It's too important locally. I know Brad Lanfranco from Castaic Town Council is here in the room. We need improvement on the old road, both phases, phase 1 and phase 2 of improvement going up into Castaic. We need metro line double tracking and expansion. We need the Vista Canyon Rail Station built. And those are some of the investments that are happening in LA County. But locally, we need to continue to push as a community. And there are no greater advocates for the importance of that than the business community. So to the extent that you can write to the senator and myself so that we can keep carrying that message, we want more of those resources for the projects that we have right here at home, that would be incredibly helpful. Housing and homelessness, obviously another big priority issue across the state. In the county level, we're going to be doing a pretty significant investment. There's also a significant investment that will be rolling out to cities and continuums of care. And all options are on the table when it comes to housing and homelessness. Later this week, I'll be convening with some other colleagues in the San Fernando Valley on solutions. What are the financing barriers? What are the structural barriers? What are some of the things that we need to change in order to accelerate our timeline of closing what is a deficit of about 3 million housing units of shortage in California? Other investments, budget resiliency, we did have a pretty sizable budget surplus this year, so there is about $20 billion in reserves, additional pay down of state debt, and some additional investment, and particularly in state parks, natural resource maintenance, deferred maintenance on some of our state's treasures that we hadn't been keeping up with. And then finally, $130 million in investment in clean drinking water projects. And some of you may have heard there was consideration of what would have been called the water tax on everybody's bill. There would have been a surcharge in order to fund these projects. In the end, the projects were eventually funded out of our cap and trade resources. So that's where that investment's coming from. Local projects, these were things that I was proud to be able to advocate for locally, and we got them into the budget. Some infrastructure investment for College of the Canyons to continue to modernize, an investment in the senior center. I also serve Simi Valley, so we invested in their free health clinic there. And then $5 million for CSU Channel Islands for the establishment of a child care and child development training center. A number of the students in this district, particularly from Simi, that's their Cal State of choice. And we're just, as I said, are going to continue to work on resources for local transportation investment. I think that's probably one of the greatest advocacy roles that the senator and I have going forward, is just fighting for our community's share of that budget.
Okay. Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Smith. Appreciate it. And Senator Wilk, in case your lavalier mic isn't doing good, look what I'm doing. I just hold it here on my fingers, so go ahead.
No, it's fine. Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for coming. This is a good turnout for July, right?
Very good.
Teresa, you owe Christy me. Definitely. And I don't know who ordered the steak, but I feel like I got peppercorns in between my teeth, so I'm incredibly uncomfortable right now because I know that they're there. So I think I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. So I'm now midway through my 7th year in the legislature, and man, it has gone by so fast. And of course, when I went up there and raised my hand the first time on December 3rd, 2012, we had Jerry Brown as our governor, halfway through his first term, and I used to call him a political zombie. And it wasn't a pejorative. It's just that, one, there's nothing that he hadn't seen because he'd been in office so long and so old. And you couldn't kill him because he was just there, and I think he's always going to be there. So we have a new governor. I thought he started out kind of fast, and then he's kind of sputtered. Did he turn that mic off on me, the governor? Anyway, but I would never criticize anybody in their first year because, you got to get your feet underneath you. He's brought in a lot of people from D.C. instead of hiring Californians, and I think that's kind of tripped him up a little bit. But I do serve as vice chair of the Rules Committee, and the big difference between the Senate and the Assembly is that we have the constitutional duty of advice and consent as it relates to gubernatorial appointments. So the governor gets about not quite 3,600. Out of those 837 of them, I have to interview. Along with my other colleagues, and make decisions on. And that has gone incredibly slow. I had a conversation with the appointments people last week, and I guess we're going to get slammed in January, which is fine. And you hear a lot that we're the 5th largest economy in the world, and we are. but that's not because of Sacramento. That's because of you. And the best way to see how we're doing is to have a free market comparison. And I call it the U-Haul test. So Vanessa and I used to be in a church small group, and it was 5 couples. We don't have that anymore because 3 couples moved. One moved to McKinney, Texas, which is outside of Dallas. I heard it looks a lot like here. I don't know, never been. And one moved to Henderson, Nevada. So the way you can see if you're doing well or not is you go on uhaul.com and you order a truck one way. So I went on this weekend, ordered a 20-foot truck to their 2 to 3 bedroom house. So if you're going to go from Santa Clarita to McKinney, Texas, they're going to charge you $2,798 for that truck. Now, if you're McKinney, Texas, and want to come back to God's country, it's only $985 because they've got to get the trucks back for all the Californians that are leaving. And that's 65% higher. And I did it last year, the same time last year, and those numbers have held. So Santa Clarita to Henderson, Nevada. Now, you've got to remember, Nevada is a nuclear waste dump site. It just is. Santa Clarita at Henderson last year, it cost you $518 for that truck to go to Henderson. Coming back, it was $153. I ran it this weekend, not as good, $711 to go to Henderson and only $109 to get it back to California. That tells me all we need to know. So if you're camping and you got a friend who's running in the forest and you know that there's a ledge on the ledge right over the horizon, you say, hey, stop, there's a cliff. And unfortunately, I believe that we're heading for a cliff. And I'll tell you why. First of all, we've had historic economic expansion, and Governor Brown used to teach all the time, it's going to end, it's going to end. And I think Governor Newsom, he's done a lot of one-time money, so I don't have a lot of criticism of his budget. I think we need to be doing some more in some areas, but again, he's just got this first year. So about $22 billion surplus this year. We got $19 billion set aside in reserve. $16.5 billion of that is in the rainy day fund. I was co-author of that back in 2014, and that has worked, and we'll continue to put money aside. And that equates to about 11.3% of our budget. Here's the problem. According to the pub, we are overly dependent on income tax, because in this state, we also treat capital gains as income tax, and it's incredibly volatile. And the market has been doing phenomenal, which is why the revenues come in. But according to the nonpartisan Public Policy Institute of California, their projections, not mine, mild recession will create over a 3-year period a $28 to $36 billion deficit. Moderate recession over 3 years, 69 to 100 billion, and a severe recession like we saw back in 2007, 173 to 185 billion dollars. Where's that money going to come from? So George Skelton, who I hope you read, he's in Mondays, Thursdays, LA Times, kind of the dean of the press corps up there. This is what he wrote on January 7th. The options are ugly. Trim pensions, raise taxes, increase employee and government contributions, or cut other public programs such as education. Local governments could also go bankrupt and slash retiree benefits. That's what we're heading towards. Some things we could do. One, I think like 19 other states, we should go to a 2-year budget process. Because one of the things that we really fail, we constitutionally, we have oversight over the administration. And I don't feel like we do a good enough job on that. And I think if we did budget 1 year, policy another year, we'd be much more proactive. And then also, that would give us less time to cause mischief, like criminalizing plastic straws. I mean, I just think we have better uses of our times. We need tax reform, which honestly, I don't think we have the political will to do. So right now we got 40 million residents in this state. 150,000 of those people produce 47% of our general fund budget. 150,000. And so we can't continue to soak the rich because they're going to leave. I mean, they're going to Nevada right now. And a story I used to tell when I was running the first time for the Assembly, it was right after Lamar Odom got traded to Dallas. Of course, Texas is a no-tax state. He was married to Khloe, right, Khloe? Is that the one? Vanessa Khloe Kardashian? Is that who was he married to, Khloe? Well, she's related to the Kardashians. I don't know if you know that or not. Anyway, so she went. So I had read that she had made $12 million a year before. So that was before we've increased taxes since then, but back then it was only 10.3%. Now it's 13.3%. So we'll just call it an even 10. So she made $12,000. So she paid $1.2 million in state taxes. So if you're going to backfill, the average California makes $55,000. So to backfill one Khloe Kardashian takes 1,333 average Californians. So we have to be careful where we go to get the money. So we have that going. And all my school board members know what else is coming, and that is the public employee pension time bomb, which is tick, tick, tick. And again, Governor Brown and Governor Newsom this year, we have been paying down. So a lot of this stuff, it's been a long time coming. So case example, the Constitution requires every year that the state auditor conduct a state audit, adds up our assets, our liabilities, and produces a number. So fifth largest economy in the world, our net worth as a state, negative $169 billion. We haven't been on the plus side since 2001 in the Gray Davis tech boom years. So this is a quote from Warren Buffett. It was in San Francisco Business Times on February 26th of this year. If I were relocating into some state that had a large unfunded pension plan, I'm walking into liabilities, Buffett said. Because I mean, who knows whether they're going to get it from the corporate income tax or my employees, with personal income tax or what. That liability isn't gonna, you can't ship it offshore or anything like that, and those are really big numbers, which they are. And according to the Public Policy Institute of California, again, nonpartisan, nonprofit, CalPERS, upside down, $138.9 billion. CalSTRS, $107.3 billion. The UC pension system, $19 billion. And then we have additional $91.5 billion in unfunded retiree health care costs. And according to the California Policy Center, when you add up state and local liabilities, $1.5 trillion. That's depressing. So it's just, I hyperventilate sometimes because it's just so daunting. And my friend, Senator John Moorlach, who serves with me in the Senate, prior to that, he was on the County Board of Suits. Prior to that, he was County Treasurer of Orange County. And he got to be County Treasurer of Orange County because back in the 90s, if you remember, Orange County was booming. They had a treasurer called Robert Citron, and he was making all kinds of money through derivatives. And John Moorlach was doing an analysis and said, it's going down, it's going down, it's going down. And it did go down. Orange County filed bankruptcy. They threw out the old guy, and they put in Moorlach. And so he's a CPA by profession, so he does a lot of analysis. So here locally, so he goes through and looks at all these liabilities, and then he ranks everybody. So LA County, so we have 58 counties in this state. LA County is rated 52nd. The higher you are, the better. Santa Clarita, there's 482 cities in the state. We're 119, not bad. Community colleges, there's 72 districts. College of the Canyon ranks 61st. And we have 944 school districts, and I'm going to go in order. Newhall's the best at 359. Sulphur Springs 469. Saugus an even 500. Hart's at 610, and Castaig's at 623. So it's daunting. So I just wanted to throw those out because we so oftentimes get caught up in the urgent that we don't look at what's important. And so we're going to have to address these things, and I'm not sure how we address them because we already have the highest income tax in the country. We have the highest sales tax in the country. We have the highest corporate tax in the country, and we have the highest gas tax in the country. So it's going to be interesting times. I don't know when this is all going to blow. Basically, I was in this room a few months back when the economist said 2021, so it might be then. it's all coming. I'm really concerned about it. I think that's information that you ought to know. So with that, the questions are going to be easier than dealing with this. So I'm sure we're happy to take on your questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Senator Wilk. Thank you, Assemblymember Smith. Thank you so much. And we do, of course, have more questions than we'll have time to get through today, but just I'll go through them as we receive them. So the first question here is, can you tell us how you feel about single-payer health care in California? So,
Happy to. Single-payer healthcare in the state of California was unaffordable. There was a measure that came out of the Senate, ended up stalled in the Assembly. The Assembly Speaker convened a study panel to look at global solutions and solutions in other states. We simply cannot afford to implement it in California. We also can't afford to implement single payer without a significant federal restructuring of Medicaid and Medicare. So it is near term, not really a great solution for us. Legislation has passed in this cycle to try to help stabilize the healthcare market. Certainly a lot more could be done, and I think we do need to start looking at very creative solutions, expanding and opening markets perhaps outside of California, allowing health companies to do that. Having some kind of publicly available option, probably from the federal level, but not as the standard of everybody's care, but an opt-in, sliding scale available public health insurance that people could buy into when there is no room for them in the private insurance market. And I think that helps us ensure that everybody has coverage, which then stabilizes the market in general for folks. But I don't see, in any time in the near term, single payer coming up again as a viable option for California.
Senator.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can't afford it. And a couple weeks ago, a friend of mine mailed me a letter. Here, he lives in Valencia, mailed me a letter. I never got it. So if the government can't deliver a letter, I'm really concerned about them delivering health care. But I mean, it's something that I'm concerned about. I mean, I have a wife with leukemia. I have a son that currently is cancer-free, but had a really rough fourth quarter last year. And honestly, the private sector needs to do a better job. I mean, I never pulled a senator card. I had to pull the senator card, and it still didn't work because just really, really callous and not fulfilling their duties to constituents and to their customers. So we need to move to have as broad as access as possible. I think that's important. Single payer, yeah, it's just not only the cost, but obviously we'd have to get so many sign-offs from the federal government because they're talking about you would have to eliminate Medicaid, you have to eliminate Medicare. I just don't see that as politically viable. And so we need to work on doing what we can to hold down healthcare costs, and we've certainly done that. I know one of only 2 Republicans that voted that require Big Pharma to release 30 days in advance if they're going to increase their prices of their drugs so people could go buy those drugs. And the governor's got a proposal this year to broaden the pool, to pull our resources to buy pharmaceuticals to try to drive the cost down for consumers. It's not an easy fix, but it's something we need to try to do.
Is there any legislative relief in sight for the workers' comp laws that put such a burden on small businesses in the state of California?
No, none.
No, but it's something I'm willing to work on, and I'm sure the senator is as well. And I know some of you in the business community that I've reached out to, it's a prime topic of conversation. So anything that we can look into for fixes there, I'm open. I'm sure the senator is as well.
What can the state do to help fund solutions for the 5 freeway in Castaic to help alleviate the old road traffic problems in the community?
Well, first of all, Caltrans could be doing a better job of actually repairing the 5, and if you write me a letter to tell me that, I would appreciate having it, and I think I'd be happy to work with the senator on this as well. We need Caltrans to come down and ride that road with the 2 of us and explain kind of what's going on there, because the bad lanes in some cases got worse. And again, this is part of the broader conversation that we need to be having about, look, North LA County is the last big place that we can do significant and smart housing development. We cannot do that without transportation. One of the things that this governor has repeated over and over again was that those were going to be the purse strings tied to transportation investment was your ability to meet your housing numbers and housing growth. We can do that here, but we've got to hold feet to the fire when it comes to making sure that that's a reciprocal relationship, that we do get those resources back here in county coffers and local coffers so that we can do that road improvement and road expansion. But really, we need your partnership on this I-5 project. It has not gone at all what I would have expected, certainly as a taxpayer and definitely not as a legislator, and I'd like to see some improvement.
I only represent I-5 going north. So I take no responsibility for I-5 south. So I only have half the problem. I forgot what the question was. I was just so committed to the line that I forgot the question. One more time.
Yes, sorry. The question is, what could you possibly do to help with the traffic situation on I-5, especially as it pertains to the
and I agree with everything the Assemblywoman said. The other challenge we have is just topography. So Larry Rasmussen gave me a book years ago, and it was published in, I think, 1906. It was called The Ignorance of Valor, and it was written by a gentleman by the name of Homer Lee, who was an American of Chinese descent, dropped out of West Point because he couldn't physically compete, but the Chinese don't like the Japanese. And he wrote a book on how Japan could conquer America. It sold like 3,500 copies in America. It sold 86,000 copies in Japan. And it's a fascinating read. And so he lays out the whole plan how you take over LA. But once you take over LA, you have 3 points you have to defend. And in the book, it's called the Saugus Pass, not the Newhall Pass. And he said when the Americans counterattack, you can't go through there. Because you just physically, you can't. You have to attack it through other ways. So that area is it's a choke point in the entire, the I-5 system is the backbone of the federal transportation system from, Baja California to British Columbia. It's a problem. I think it's always going to be a problem. So whatever we can do to mitigate it, I'm fine. But I'm not a big fan of Caltrans. We've both been working on a signal light on the 126, and and people are dying, and they're just not that responsive. So.
What are your plans for helping the homeless and the food insecure and foster youth in our community?
You've got a great foster bill.
So on homeless, I've got a bill this year that's sitting in Assembly Appropriations Committee. Assemblywoman Smith and Assemblyman Lackey are co-authors. And when I was running for this, there's homeless everywhere, but when I was running for the Senate the first time, so my district is mentioned, Santa Clarita, Antelope Valley, Victor Valley. Really bad homelessness out in the Antelope Valley. And of course, they have extreme temperatures of highs and lows, and people are like literally living in holes in the middle of the desert. And the providers were sharing, hey man, we're not getting our fair share of resources from LASA, which is this joint agency between LA County and City of LA. Looking at the numbers, certainly seemed like that was true. So Lackey and I, because this is 3 years ago now, Lackey and I were able to get an audit approved by the state auditor through the Joint Legislative Committee. What's really interesting about that, not Catherine Barger, but every other LA County supervisor was calling LA County delegation members, asking them to vote no on the audit request. Anyway, got it approved. And LASA was doing some things wrong, and they fixed their funding formula, which is fine. But she was concerned. She calls me, and I met with her at 8 o'clock in the morning, and she said, we're getting ready to spend billions of dollars on homelessness, and we have no infrastructure, we have no plan, and I'm just afraid billions of dollars are going to be wasted. So last year, because I sat on budget last year, I got a member's request in to fund, because we had approved it but never funded it, the Homeless Coordinating and Finance Council. So that's now funded. So the bill that we're doing is taking all the recommendations that's in the state auditor's report, and that will be the charge for this new council. So strategic plan with benchmarks, best practices, because none of those things are being done. So I believe in having compassion for the homeless, but I also want to have compassion for the taxpayers. And if we're going to spend your money on homelessness, we want it to be effective. So That was kind of long, so I'll let her talk. I can talk about foster youth too, but we'll do.
I completely agree with everything Senator Wilk said, and we have such a phenomenal ally in LA County in Catherine Barger. This is a sweet spot of policy knowledge for her. She is really fantastic at this job, and not only the homelessness crisis in general, but specifically drilling down on the mental health component and what we can do to get folks off the street who need those mental health care services. It does take us being persistent, though, and making sure that we're getting that local investment, because a lot of people think Los Angeles and they think city center, and they're not thinking the outlying areas of the county where we really need to be advocating for those resources as well. So I'm pleased to be working on this together, and metrics are a really important part of it. Every conversation when I go out in the community, people say, but we haven't seen anything deliverable yet. We've only seen the numbers get worse, but they haven't actually seen tangible progress towards this. So to that point of having deliverables and metrics of success is, it's good policy. And then I think the other part was about foster youth, and you've got your bill.
Yeah, so on foster youth, I mean, it's just incredibly heartbreaking what these kids go through. And so LA County's got it's like almost 70,000 foster youth, and over half of them are in the Antelope Valley. And if you talk to providers in this space that work with this, about 25% of those parents should not be foster parents. They're in it strictly for the money. A lot of times they keep the money, starve the kids. So I've been working with Sharon Quirk Silva on a bill that would, if a foster child gets moved, that there be additional money for the parents so they could continue going to the same school, because these kids lack stability, and so try to make it more stable, because a lot of times the parents, they don't have enough money, so they don't do it. And then my bill it's a pilot program, but it go up to $500 a year for extracurricular activities for these kids, because not only are they moving around, but they don't get to participate in sports, dance, whatever. So I'm working on this bill with a young woman named April. She's aged out, but now she's an advocate for foster youth. And we were talking about the bill the first time. I don't know why I'm laughing, because it's not funny. But so she goes, I wish this was available when I was in high school, because I wanted to be in band. And a normal question you would ask somebody, right? It's like, oh, great, what instrument, did you want to play? And I asked her that, and she goes, I don't know, I just wanted a place to belong. And they had a sense of community. And that, that's just horrible. And the one house she was in, it was her, 2 other foster youth, and the parents were spending the money on the biological daughter, and they had to steal food to survive. I mean, the food was locked up, and that is not uncommon. So one of my things, I'm really going to focus on this issue. Hopefully I get reelected in 20, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on this issue, because we have to raise everybody up. And if you look at the numbers, the general population graduates high school about 84%, foster youth 54%, graduating from college 4%, and they represent nearly 20% of the prison population. And I don't think that's God's vision for any of those kids. So anyway.
Thank you so much. Next question is, safety is a top priority for schools and colleges. We understand the budget is tight. How about securing additional state and or federal funding for safety in schools? Is that something that could be considered?
I mean, typically, safety plans and programming is left to the local district with their discretionary resources, and some local districts have been able to finance that in a number of different ways. It certainly wouldn't be off the table, but it's just part of that larger calculus of how much should we be spending, in those K-12 allocations for sure, to make sure that there is a comprehensive set of services, which includes site safety. And all of our local districts are really stretched thin. Again, some of those folks are here today, and a number of these districts have been in deficit spending since the recession, and that continues for various reasons. First of all, is actual ADA funding that we get locally. Another is, declining enrollment. A lot of our neighborhoods are aging, and that means our school-aged population is decreasing, and that presents very significant challenges. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but it does kind of all get lumped into that K-12 amount that we need to be thinking about. How do we increase that allocation?
Yeah, I agree with everything she said, but it's something if we can address, we ought to address. So just because, based upon the curriculum, I typically will go talk to 4th graders, 8th graders, and 12th graders. So last year, I was in an elementary school in Hesperia, which is kind of rural, right? And so one of the questions I asked, if I could pass one law for you, what would it be? Girl raises her hand right away, and I said, sure, what would that be? And she said, metal detectors. Fourth graders should not have to be worried about metal detectors. So, I agree with everything, she said. We're limited, but it needs to be a priority. I think we spend so much money like at the airport, which I think is a complete waste of our time and our tax dollars, and then we don't protect our most precious resources, our children that are sitting there in these places. So anyway, so our hands are tied a little bit, but you never say never.
What do you see as the greatest challenge facing the disability community, and what do you plan on doing to tackle this issue in the coming year?
Yeah. That one significantly, without a doubt, also is funding. And there's a full spectrum of services that are available, to cradle and beyond for our intellectually disabled populations, but they come at a cost. And, the state raised the minimum wage, and a lot of the workers in that sector providing assistance and support are minimum wage workers. That has put a strain on the entire system. I was someone who signed on this year and advocated for the requested 8% increase in our state's budget in order to help our regional centers meet those cost demands. We did not quite get there. We ended up getting about half of that when the budget negotiation was done. But it's also something that, it would be great to see our communities. We're so philanthropic here in Santa Clarita, and we have the benefit of a wonderful regional center, but they need more voices. Very often you're talking about families who are caring for one loved one who has, maybe sometimes both physical disabilities as well as intellectual disabilities, and sometimes it's one or the other. But advocacy for them is something that they rarely can carve out time to do. Many of them do it because they care so very much about that loved one. But if some of us in our organizations here in the community could partner with them in that work, in both just raising awareness and in advocacy, and in many cases fundraising. It is a very worthwhile and very necessary cause. We know that the number of children diagnosed now with special needs is on a pretty steep increase. And those youngsters come through our public school system. They're going through the regional centers for help and support. So this is not a cost that's going to diminish over time. It's something we're really going to have to grapple with as a state. But being good allies is a very important thing we could all do.
Senator?
Yeah, I agree with all that, but we weren't there, but during the Great Recession, they severely slashed funding this community with the promise that they would be the first one to have the funding restored. And that has not happened. Governor Brown was very callous on this issue. As the Assemblywoman mentioned, we made strides this year, not enough for me, but it's going in the right direction. And we just have an obligation here. So I've been working on something. This year I actually gave it to a Democrat, hoping he could get it done. He couldn't get it done either. But I had a father and a son come in to see me, 3 years ago. And so the federal law and 38 other states say if you have acquired or traumatic brain injury before the age of 22, you can access services. In this state, it's 18. So this young man, very, very smart, very gifted artist, hit about 6 weeks after he turned 18 by a drunk driver, T-boned, brain damage. Couldn't access services. Now, he's blessed that his father, very successful screenwriter, and was able to get those services. So I've been working, and this is just an equity issue to me. 38 other states have it. It's the federal law. We're not doing it, and we need to do it, and I'm going to continue to work on that. But I'm an advocate for this community, and will continue to be so.
What is California doing to close the immigrant detention camps and to reunite separated children with their families?
Well, immigration policy and the current detainment of individuals is federal. And so there isn't much we can do at the state level. The state passed SB 54 a few cycles ago, which speaks to how local law enforcement agencies can and should interact with federal enforcement. And that has led to kind of the, controversy and conversations around sanctuary state or sanctuary city. which California is, in the sense that, yes, we have established a set of parameters, which, by the way, were supported at the time by the LA County Sheriff and LAPD Chief, that talks about, we're not going to be using local resources in a federal enforcement role, because that's not a good use of local resources. And we depend in California very, very heavily on our immigrant community in provision of services and labor of all types. And, it has happened in other states where significant immigration enforcement was undertaken. Georgia was one. It nearly crippled their agriculture industry for the years that they undertook it. But it is a federal role and responsibility, and I'm talking to our Congresswoman every time I see her about what can happen in some form of a compassionate immigration policy. To me, if a mother or a father or the entire family is walking with a child on their back across a river to become American, because they know what those values are that we have here and the opportunities that await them. These aren't folks who are intentionally doing this illegally. These are families who want better for their kids. And we have got to come to terms with that as a nation and reinvent a system that works for a new global dynamic. We are simply in a different world. So, long-winded answer, but I know it's something that, across the board that people feel very fired up about now. And of course we want significant criminal enforcement at our borders. Of course we want to limit human trafficking and drug trafficking and the illicit part of things that can happen across national borders. But fundamentally, immigration is a humanitarian issue, and we need to be addressing it that way.
Senator?
Yeah, again, it's a federal issue, and unfortunately, both parties are using it as a wedge issue, and we need to have comprehensive immigration reform. I know many of you people know Patsy Ayala, who's on my staff, and it took her 12 years to become an American citizen. And if you look at her and her husband, so he's got a PhD, she's got a master's. I'm not sure how long it took Julio to become a citizen, but we have to fix that system.
Two more questions for you, because we want to be respectful of your time, of course. What legislation do you anticipate that will impact small businesses? And I'm assuming that people meant negatively, but is there legislation in the works that might anticipate small business in a positive and or a negative manner? Either or, there might be some good things as well.
Yeah, I don't know about the Senator, but I am still particularly concerned about what the outcome is around AB 5, which is the legislative response to the Dynamex decision. I've been in regular conversations with the author, Lorena Gonzalez, and I know a number of industry-specific carve-outs are happening, but the more I talk to all of you in the small business community, I get the but what about, and it's just something that we hadn't thought about. The range of people who now define their work as independent contractors, and not because they've been forced to. A number of people really are choosing this option because it suits their needs. So I think we need to be very careful about what that legislative outcome is. And I am just particularly wary of a lot of things in the regulatory environment. And to the Senator's point earlier, we are at a really critical tipping point right now where the out-of-state losses are mounting in a way that should be concerning to people. And so making sure that we are keeping taxes in check and a regulatory environment in check is really important. It came to my office secondhand recently that a local restaurant that we've all probably enjoyed at some point had a disgruntled former employee who filed some claims with state offices. And the fixes were so costly that it was definitely going to mean that workers' hours were reduced, or there was going to be some kind of other cuts in that business. It was a restaurant, and so they didn't have proper guardrails around a stand mixer, and the fines for that were going to be $10,000. Now, I'm sure this restaurant owner could have probably replaced the entire equipment with new guardrails for that, yet they were being burdened with this $10,000 cost to stay operational. And not often enough in California in the regulatory environment do we help businesses get to yes. Do we help them comply to get to success? And that really should be what our role is. It shouldn't be punitively focused. It should be supportively focused. And so fines should be reasonable, and there should be technical support there to help people become compliant, because the majority of California's workers work in small business. And we've got to be mindful of that because we've got our Apples and our Googles, and that's great. We hope to keep them here because they like their nice spot at Santa Monica Beach. But for employers like yourselves, we have got to be mindful of the environment you have to operate in.
So yeah, I mean, obviously AB 5, so has already cleared her house, coming to my house. I've been having conversations with the author as well, and I'm thinking maybe we should take a look at it as an LA County delegation as well, because there's going to be some major impact to the film industry. So we're here for a couple more weeks, then we go back for the final 4 weeks, and honestly, I love the job except for like the last 10 days, because we were on the floor 7 to 12, 13 hours a day, and we're voting on stuff that's bad for California and bad for California business. And a lot of times what happens, I'm not going to go in the whole process, but a lot of times what happens, we kill stuff because it's bad, and then there's a process called gut and amend. So they'll take a bill that's very deep into the process, they gut it, and then they amend it, and they amend in something completely different, and then they try to slam it through. So things that I think we could see coming back this year, rent control. We killed rent control. I think you might see rent control come back. There is a split roll initiative that's been approved that's supposed to be on the ballot in November 2020. One of the things that happens up there, the majority party will go to people who are opposed to it and go, okay, we can battle on this and spend tens of millions of dollars, or why don't we do this, and it's less onerous to you. So I think you could possibly see something on split, modified split roll. And then housing. I guess there's some coming over from your house that I haven't seen yet. So our big bill was SB 50. We both were opposed to. They got pocketed in the Senate Appropriations Committee. So, and then I know Governor Newsom has talked quite a bit about how he was not happy about that. So you could see some gut and amend stuff on housing, which may or may not be good. I personally think we should just reform CEQA, and that we'll do everything but reform CEQA. So I think those are things that are potentially coming through.
Okay, and then, there it is. Our last question, just kind of a fun question. After everything you've experienced so far, each of you, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I'm going to be retired. It'll be like right at the 5-year mark.
Full disclosure, 5 years from now, I will be planning what will be a run for state superintendent of public instruction.
Okay, there you go. So we started out this, and again, trying to be respectful of everybody's time, and especially yours as well, saying that, elected officials, the 2 words they don't hear often enough are thank you. So again, thank you to both of you, and I think this dialogue and this session up here today kind of proves and reiterates what I said to begin with. You're both compassionate about the people you represent. You do such an exceptional job. You're both so approachable and so sincere and so classy in the way you go about it. And I just have to commend the 2 of you again for the way you do what you do. Thank you for the way you represent us, and thank you so much for being here today for the lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.